I would like to hear your opinion on this issue, guys. When you go to a restaurant these days, after you're done with your food and you're ready to leave, you get your receipt, and the next thing you see is going to be gratitude. It can be in 20 to 25%, and that's what we call tipping in America. So lately, this has been a controversial issue that people have been talking about online, that tipping has becoming something else. It's more or less like you're being forced to tip now when you go to the restaurant. I remember back in the days, I went out with my family to go and eat out in a restaurant. And at the end of the day, we were ready to leave so that we can make payment. But to my surprise, they were actually trying to make us to pay 25% as a tip. That kind of pisses me off. And I helped out like, no, I'm not paying. I don't want anyone to force me into tipping. When I get to a point that things are getting out of hand, people will begin to see the other side of it, like, why are they making this mandatory? Anytime you come to the restaurant, you are expected to tip your waiter or your server. And it's beginning to generate some controversial, discussion about, for me, naturally, I would say that there's nothing wrong in tipping if you get a good service, but I will not tip anytime I see gratitude or they want to put me on a spot that so that I have to tip. For that reason, I will not tip. But is there any reason these days that people are now talking about tipping? How did we get into tipping in the first place? From my own understanding, for what I've gathered, I realized that the price customers are paying for food these days has been double. And that is not giving room for tipping. Before the pandemic, the price we are paying for a plate of food is like double after the pandemic. One thing the restaurant owner needs to understand that customer salaries are not doubled, but the food they are eating at your restaurant is doubled in price. So what do you expect? I think these are the area I believe tipping is lacking, or why people don't feel the urge or the necessity to tip anymore. Not because people don't want to tip. It's like, I'm paying too much for the food already. Why should I tip? Is there a way we can make this go away, or how can we solve this problem that we don't need to make it like an obligation for a customer? I think the problem is that restaurant owners are kind of looking greedy to me, because if you're a restaurant worker, if you're a server or waiter, it's a job. And I expect that the owner of the restaurant should be paying their worker very well, that they do not need to depend on the tip. Why is tip like something a restaurant have to make it look like a big deal? If that's so, who is paying your own tip? Who is paying my own tip? What about the guy driving the 18-wheelers? Who is paying their own tip? What about the UPS guys? What about the FedEx guys? Who is paying their own tip? Like I said earlier, tipping should be voluntary. And I do give generously when it is voluntary. But the moment I see that number on my receipt, it pisses me off, and I decide not to pay tip at all. All these big restaurants want you to pay between 20 to 25% as a tip. That's not cool with me. So guys, what do you think about tipping? Tipping should be voluntary. It should be willingly. It should be something you're willing to do. It shouldn't be something that you're putting on a spot. It should be something that our restaurant will be the one dictating how much you're going to pay as a tip. That kind of pisses me off. I think government should make it illegal for any restaurant to put tag or a price on how much you should tip. That should be illegal. I want restaurant owner to understand that you don't have to go home with all the money. Pay your workers very well so that they don't need the tip. Because I understand the reason why this tipping of a thing exists is because you're not paying them very well. It's because you are not paying them livable wages. You're paying them below minimum wage. Sometimes some of these people get to pay $3 an hour and make their waiters believe that they make more money on tip. It should be illegal for any restaurant to pay their workers below minimum wage. It should be illegal. Now, if they get tip, fine. If they don't get tip, it's not going to affect them. For me personally, I don't think their livelihood should depend on tips. It shouldn't be so. If they're working for you, I expect you to pay them livable wages. At least minimum wage. If I order a food from your restaurant, you charge me for that, I expect you also to pay your workers. And I believe that is understandable enough, right? So do not put that burden on me that I must give your server a tip. No, I don't have to. And if I'm giving tip, I want to do it at my own discretion. So that's going to be my position on this one, guys. I would like tip to be voluntary and not something should be forced or put on my receipt. Guys, I would like to hear your opinion on this issue. What do you think about giving tips in America? Is it an American thing? Is it culture? Or is it something that people just do to make the waiters or the server feel good? So guys, that's going to be my wrap up on this one. Until next time, stay blessed. Bye-bye.